I'm going to start. I watched Enola Holmes this afternoon, which was just great fun. I just wondered what it was. Obviously, I'm going to speak to you about all sorts of things with your career, but with this particular project, what was it that initially attracted you to getting involved?
I think mainly it was Harry's involvement in it, knowing all the sort of work that he's done before, um, with Killing Eve and Fleabag. I just kind of, as a sort of viewer, I felt very safe in that sort of in his hands, telling that sort of story, sort of keeping one step ahead of the audience, but not feeling as though he wasn't bringing the audience along in sort of the narrative of the story. So that sort of really appealed to me.
Yeah, just generally speaking, when you comes to kind of picking projects, what's your kind of main draw? Do you go more by the character, the screenplay, people you've worked with before? What's usually your kind of defining moment where you think, right, I want to take
Yeah,
this on?
yeah. I mean, Harry was a big draw for me for this film, but then you've also got to take in consideration that I don't have that much clout at the minute. So there's also the idea of just being sort of feeling really privileged to be asked to be a part of something, you know. So I'm not getting loads of scripts at my door to sort of pick and choose from. So it's and when you're asked to do something like this, like Enola Holmes, you just take a look at who's involved in it, and you know, Harry be directing it and Millie being, you know, sort of helming the whole thing. And you just go, well, you just do it.
Yeah.
It'd be silly not to, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Millie,
Yeah.
she's getting a huge following. I mean, obviously off the back of Stranger Things, but she's obviously becoming this kind of global superstar. What was she like to work with in the scenes that you guys shared?
Uh, it's so difficult just to sort of summarize in just a few sentences. It, she's just so present with who she is as a person, but that also comes through as a performer as well. You know, she's kind of um, she knows what she's doing as a performer, and she's sort of and it's that feeling of going, well, you could sort of look at her in this context with all this sort of massive production around her in this massive film, or you could just sort of sit and chat to her, just, you know, and it would be the same thing. It's that quality that makes a performance that she's given in Nola so sort of vital and like just really good. She's really good.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember I was watching it. I was thinking about like the character and the whole idea behind the character. It's obviously a story that's going to be quite inspiring for lots of young, particularly young girls out there. And I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
going back to your own sort of childhood, not that you grew up as a young girl, but do you remember did you have a film or a character in a film or an actor or sportsman or anything that you remember thinking they made you believe you could be anyone you wanted to be?
I got into this author called Hanif Qureshi quite young when I was and I went to quite a posh boarding school, so I was one of a few brown kids at that school, and I remember picking up his books and sort of just seeing all the stuff that was linked with who he was. So he wrote for the Royal Court for a little while, so I read his plays, and then there was TV stuff that he had on, Buddha of Suburbia and things like that. And I just remember going, and I think there's a parallel to be drawn here for young girls watching Millie in Enola as well. It just shows the vastness of a character, and it shows just all the different things a person can be and do, you know. And yeah, I hope it sort of, I hope people get that sort of connection from Enola that I got from Hanif Qureshi and all his writing and all his work. Yeah.
Do you think it's sort of getting to a point when we sort of do away with being really stringent and sort of historically accurate when it comes to period pieces, and be more colourblind in our casting as well? Because you look at like what Armando Iannucci did with David Copperfield and stuff, and
Yeah.
and he had a whole cast where people were related that were different colours, and everyone was kind of it all just worked because we believed in the story and we adhered to the suspended our disbelief because it's cinema. And do you think that that there should be more roles perhaps in kind of period dramas for people of color, and we should kind of be more colorblind in that regard?
I think the more that there is, then I think this sort of conversation that we have becomes more internalized in a way, and we don't have to sort of overtly talk about anything apart from how good the actual thing is. So how good, or so for Armando Iannucci's stuff, how funny it is, or for period dramas, just how moving it is. And I think the more and more we do that, and the more and more we sort of just cast people that we feel are right for the job, then those sorts of questions become not irrelevant but less important. They become, and we're just sort of in the middle of all that at the moment. So I really love conversations about it, because the more conversations there are about it, the less we'll have to have in the future, and just makes it easier for people just to sort of be cast in roles that they're right for.
Yeah, I just obviously I know that Enola is a character of her own right, but it is obviously connected to the Sherlock Holmes franchise. What do you think it is about this character? This character will not go away, and I mean that in a good way. I love anything Sherlock related. Like there's every sort of few years we get another movie adaptation. We have the TV series, and it just feels like there's something about this character which is just so intrinsically kind of, I don't know, in our culture. And I just wonder what you think it is about Sherlock Holmes and that world that we just can't seem to shake off.
Yeah. What is it? I think I'm not sure if it's to do with Sherlock Holmes himself, but it has to in some ways. But it's also sort of contemporizing ideas that are quite old and traditional. So if you look at sort of the sort of recent adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, it's kind of bringing it into present day. It's not this sort of stuffy, kind of old traditional way of looking at it. And I think it's that sort of thing that makes the character interesting. It's sort of a homage to like the old and traditional, but sort of forcing it into something sort of in the present day and very contemporary. And I think that's what's really interesting about it.
Yeah, because I was wondering, I wanted to speak to you about, I mean, I was doing a kind of, someone asked me when we got to 2020, I think we were doing top 10 lists of that decade of movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was looking back over just the kind of 21st century, my favourite films, and Four Lions made every single list I made. It was top 5, top 3. And I just wondered if, I mean, I think it transcends just being a kind of a mere satire. I think it's a really special piece of British cinema. That's one of the best pieces of British cinema ever. Do you look back and on those terms? And when you made it, do you remember thinking we're working on something really special here, or was it something that it took a while for that to kind of sink in?
I mean, that came at a time where I was sort of, I just remember the actual experience of it going by really fast, only because I couldn't believe I was in it. I just couldn't believe I was around these people telling this story in front of Chris Morris, who was shouting really, really silly things for me to do behind the camera. I just couldn't believe I was in that situation. So the actual experience of it was one of like, just get this done to the best of your ability. And now looking back on it, like with most of his stuff, it's that sort of slow burn effect. And I'm so surprised how many conversations I have like that with people. And it's just gone on and on and on. So, but you see the age of the people who love it, sort of the same. So that sort of those guys in their mid-20s who are sort of slowly stretching their head around the idea of irony and satire, you know, and they're sort of going, and that's the real amazing thing for me. The sort of conversations, like I was having conversations like that when we were making it with people in their 20s, and now and it's just been passed on and passed on and passed on in a way that's just so amazing. It's and I just just love having conversations with them about people. You know, just sort of about how would we do we have a climate now where we'd be able to broach those sort of subjects now, like we did back then, 2010, and if not, why not? And what would be the reasons for us? And who's allowed to tell that story as well? Like, you know, it's just, I've had so many interesting chats about it and around it that I don't know if we've got enough time to sort of dive into. But yeah, I love talking about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting for me because I saw it obviously when it came out and just loved it as a piece of comedy, but obviously as a piece of as satire. But about 3 years afterwards, the identity of Jihadi John was announced, and he was in my class at school. So he was literally in my year at school. So when I went back and watched Four Lions and watched I saw it again with this kind of new perspective, having gone to school with someone that got caught up in extremism. I saw it on a whole different level, and I honestly think it's just an absolute masterpiece. But then Chris Morris is a genius, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. But then there's a sort of overlap. You mentioned Amanda Iannucci as well. It's a really difficult balance of trying to not making an intellectual pursuit almost, and filling it with enough silliness, which is just an outpost of saying, approaching it with enough heart, you know, because there's nothing more sort of democratizing than making somebody laugh at something really silly.
Yeah.
Like that's the things that's going to connect everyone, but also being intellectually smart enough to have the focus of like the pinpoint accuracy of those jokes. Like it's just really, really lean, and there's so it's that sort of balance that I just love those films, you know.
Yeah.
Those sorts of films.
I was looking at what you've got coming up, and you've got some really exciting, cool projects underway. Does it feel like, just looking at your kind of, I know that you can tell my IMDb research is just my research just IMDb credits, but you have got like there's a lot of big stuff coming up. Does it feel like quite an exciting time for you, just because it feels like you're really busy, and some of the projects, you know, The Nest and obviously everybody's talking about Jamie. I mean, these are major works.
Yeah, I suppose so. That this last year they'll be coming in. I've been doing more and more, you know, and I think we could sort of relate it to the sort of first question. When I was first starting out in the industry, there was I only had a certain expectation of myself to do certain roles, and I think the industry had a certain expectation of sort of Black and Asian actors doing certain roles, you know. And the thing that I'm sort of really feel blessed by is the variety of stuff I can do now that people just sort of accept, and that's quite a heartening thing for me to be in. Yeah.
I was going to say, so have you noticed a change, a shift in that regard since you sort of came into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that there's not sort of improvements that have to be made.
Yeah.
But I think coming from just being British and coming from a certain sort of tradition of storytelling, and you mentioned like Chris Morris and people like that, I feel like I've been lucky enough that people have sort of pushed the envelope a little bit in putting me in certain roles. And but that's not to say that I can't do more and I don't have more in the tank. It's just that I could just always compare it to when I just first started out, and it's, for me, it's so different. But then that could just be me. I could be talking about me as an individual actor, or I could be talking about, as an Asian actor. It's difficult to sort of work out, but yeah, this year has been a lot of varied stuff, and I just feel really, really lucky.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm most excited about is it Ali and Ava? Is it Clio Bernard or Cleo Bernard?
Clio.
Clio, yeah. I mean, she's
so sweet. She won't correct you until like fifth or sixth.
Did you make that same mistake?
They'll make it, yeah.
I mean, she's a superb filmmaker. I've been following all of her work, and every film she makes it's got this kind of Shane Meadows-esque quality to it. And I just wondered about that project. Has it been shot, and what was it like working and collaborating with her on that?
Yeah, it's been shot, and she. So when I first started out, I sort of looked at all those sort of heavy hitters, like the Mike Lees and the Ken Loaches and people like that, and you sort of look at them, and the thing that appeals to you about them is their process. So somebody like Ken Loach would not show you the script until you're on set, or somebody like Mike Lee just rehearses for months and months and months. And it just felt in that process with Clio that we were discovering how to tell this story. So it's based on real people, but then she sort of fictionalizes some bits, and she goes away and she writes, expands on it, or and then when you're there, you rehearse it loads, and then on the day, there's some things that you just completely let go of, but are in the performance of the piece itself. And I just felt really spoiled because it was like all these amazing guys that I've always wanted to work with, all wrapped up in this one filmmaker. And actually, I did have a thought of that when I was doing it. When you're talking about Chris Morrison, did you realise you were involved in something really important? When I was with Clio doing the work there, and it was going on, I was like, she's amazing. She's like one of the best I think we've got.
Yeah, she really is. I was wondering too about. So you're in New Zealand right now. Is that for work, or have you moved?
Yeah. So, as you know, you just do loads of pilots as an actor, and it's just sort of casting the line out and seeing what happens. And last June we did a pilot here for a graphic novel called Sweet Tooth, and then a lockdown happened, COVID struck, and everybody was just kind of waiting to see what would happen back home and whether the sort of industry would get back on course or whatever. And New Zealand was one of the first places that opened up for business, and Netflix were just like, well, we got to make this happen. And so, yeah, we're sort of in a couple of weeks into prep of it now, and moving into filming the first episode in a few weeks.
My final question before I go, because I can hear my puppy whining. It's just about how's this year been for you then? I mean, it's been obviously crazy for everyone, but as someone creative whose job is so, I mean, I guess you travel so much for work. Has it been something quite nice about spending a bit of time with the family at home? Because obviously, it's not been as easy to travel and to work. And just as a second part to that question, have you picked up any new skills or anything, like started cooking or learning instruments or anything?
Yeah, any new skills? I've been doing more cooking. Yeah. That's something that I do, but that was just something that I was always doing anyway. Yeah. But just dusting off the pasta machine that has been for ages. And more than anything, it just sort of makes me more appreciative of the fact that I feel just really lucky to be in work for that length of time, to be out of work and not doing the thing that you love doing, and then suddenly, you know, a pilot getting picked up and you can bring your family over to New Zealand and do some filming here. It just makes me feel super appreciative of like the fact that I'm still able to do what I do, you know, because there's a lot of people are taking a lot of hits, you know, and I just feel really lucky to be doing this.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey,